Hello, hello, hello. Today is Monday Fun Day. It's July 10th and I'm a little late. Crap happens. Sorry. Mondays keep coming too fast. I don't know about you, but it's coming way too fast for me. But anyway, um, a little joke while everybody gets ready because I know if it took me a while to get in, it's gonna take my viewers a while to get in here too. And I'm so sorry I'm late. But anyway, here's a little joke. You know how when during the pandemic, when all the preachers went online because the world shut down, so everybody went online and started preaching online. Well, I would always cringe when they get to the part where they would say, "Stop and slap three people and say I'm blessed." Because my boys would take that opportunity and chase each other around the house, slapping each other, talking about they blessed. You'll see one boy screaming, running, no. Meanwhile, the other kid beating the crap out of the other kid, talking about what the preacher said. Anyway, it's just the little fun things we do in the house. My kids are crazy, but boys, they're very physical. First physical, then emotional and verbal and all of that sort of thing. But anyway, that was just a little joke. I'm just kidding. They weren't slapping each other or chasing each other around the house, slapping each other, talking about they blessed. But you know how these preachers be. And they got online and they said the same thing. Hit somebody and tell somebody you blessed. I have to live here. I would like to continue to live here after this pandemic. Okay, be going around the house slapping my husband saying, I'm blessed. He's a woman. I'm just saying. Slap him, he says it. Anyway, so today's show, this is the Adroit Living session of the Erudition Network. Here, we like to volunteer this time to interact online, free of charge, to provide guided perspective, linking the subjective and the objective perspectives via science and faith to aid well-rounded knowledge and positive mental health. Science is the method humans use to tangibly make sense of things, and faith is the intangible. It is the innate part of the humanity that compels them to discern, be creative, be compassionate, and be spontaneous and behave as they do. So we can't really monitor, we can't really predict by monitoring human interactions what they're going to do because, these various factors such as faith and, people's innate ability to be spontaneous. So the subjective perspective is opinion based, and the people's opinions change quite frequently. And the objective perspective is based upon facts and factors of fact, such as faith in God and the factual evidence thereof. So, we want to make sure that we get in the whole man, not just the physical, but the intangible as well. So the tangible means physical, and intangible means not physical. So let's look and make sure we checking for comments, seeing if anybody there. Let me know. This is an interactive show, so y'all hit me in them comments. And there's a number of topics to talk. I just think of all these things, these hot topics that hit my mind, my news feed. Not socials, because I don't really have time for socials, but the news feed as far as keeping up with what current events. And I see a couple of things sometime and I'm like, man, what is this? And it comes to mind that that's a great topic to, elaborate on the show and address the mental perspectives of each side. So there's a number of things I had in mind to talk about today. Topics like let me play nice. Then I explain how even if the offender isn't thinking about their children or the other innocent loved ones in their life, they make the mistake of forcing a situation that will hurt their loved ones they may not be thinking about that, but I consider that, and I consider the consequences of how a child or a woman is dependent on their loved ones' behavior to provide, protect, and be around later. Hey, Jackie, thank you for coming, sis. I really appreciate you. I missed you. I missed you. I got to get back with Mike and let them know when I have time for the show. I got some time coming up, so hopefully you'll be there too. That'll be cool. You and your husband, uh, Mr. Hayes, uh, Sir Phil Hayes. Okay, but anyway, so let them know I said that. Let them know I said that. Okay, but I thought that I should say that because it's always, a good idea to play nice as much as you can. So I always try to make nice until David and Goliath situation becomes unavoidable. I turn the other cheek, but that side might be David. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful. Uh, that's a good topic for another day because it's a thought that should be taken more seriously than what the current group think is appropriating in this atmosphere or cycle. I see a comment. Hey, Sean Anthony, thank you for coming. Make sure you speak up about this topic. Okay, speak up. I got you. But anyway, ask some questions. Feel free. Okay, so I wanted to dive deeper into inappropriate trends and contribute more to negative mental those trends that contribute more to negative health. I wanted to elaborate on those things because sometimes people can't really see it and see why that is. Um, how it's contributing to negative mental health more so than positive mental health. Uh, and while I'll point out and illustrate examples and outcomes over a timeline, which exhibits a trend or a cycle, so people can physically see and understand how to protect expectations, to understand how to predict expectations, to understand what's logical, and to aid understanding that regardless of modern times and technology, there's nothing new under the sun. There's just different ways of doing the same things to accomplish the same goals and seasons where those concepts are easier to manifest, despite the possibility of being an anomaly or the one who did the impossible amid impossible times, because that happens all too often as well. And then that goes to play into one's faith, the subjective and the objective, their opinion that they can do something like the little engine that thought it could, and the objective, which is the fact. The fact may be challenges in your life that's preventing you from achieving what you opinionated and conceived in your life. But for somehow your faith brought you through it and you like, oh man, I made it. They said I couldn't do it, but I did it. So that's I wanted to talk about, but I also want to dive deeper into how to have an aquarium like the one in my background without having the hassle of lifting water or a million maintenance costs and efforts. No one wants it to be, mandatory to work hard all the time, or else, something fatal happens. But everyone wants beautiful and positive things. It's wonderful when you can accomplish those kind of goals with less effort. But that's always, the objective is to try to get it so that you can say, hey, I accomplished these goals and it took me the least amount of effort to do it. And everybody wants to know how that happened. So if you missed those videos, go back and check it out. I talked about how to do that. And I talked about how this aquarium is. However, I'm going to do a special. So watch for that. I'm going to do a special series that's going to be dedicated to showing you and diving deeper into how to do it with a lot more illustrations, because people like pictures. You don't want to sit here and look at my face all day and look at the fish behind me. So there's going to be illustrations that's going to show you step by step how to do, what to do, and what to expect and what it looks like. So it's all from the ground up. If you missed it on my socials and you missed the ground up, don't worry, it's coming. It's coming. Okay. Instead of diving deeper into all of those things today, I'm going to attempt to help people have a peace of mind about returning to school schedules. I know I just said the words that shouldn't be coming out of my mouth so early in July, but you'll want to hear this, even if you only have to, share it with a student, and you're not necessarily a student yourself. This is something that is helpful to help others that are in your community who are students or teachers or patrons of that community. So subscribe and ring the bell so you'll know the next time I'm live, so we can discuss and be fully engaged into other topics like the ones I mentioned. But for today, feel free to say something about the topics and comment. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I've heard from the various social media news networks. I don't listen to just one, but I heard how a lot of people have developed this Monday syndrome, where it's like, the moment you say it Monday, or the moment they know the end or the middle of Sunday, or man, wait a minute, it's Sunday. That means tomorrow is Monday. Oh man, today is Monday. Oh no. It's like a syndrome that incites or evokes panic, anxiety, stress. It makes people feel like they're locked in, and the walls are closing in on them. Their time is running out on them, and it's sort of a Monday phobia. But I think that's what they call it, Monday phobia. But I like to say syndrome, because it is something, a stimulus that's creating this feeling. And if you were a student and you could remember that had these issues when you were a student, because everybody was a student at some point. I don't care how old you were a student at some point. If you can remember, everybody, had that syndrome, that Monday phobia, because gotta go back to school. It's Monday again. Come Monday, I gotta go back to school. So now, amid the pandemic and the ongoing global crises, we're seeing more acknowledgments of a lot of things that people were dealing with as more of a local problem, or epidemic. We're seeing it on a global scale, which makes it more of a pandemic, meaning it's something that's negatively impacting the world, not just your house, not just your kids. They not lazy and they just don't want to get up for school. It's not that. And it's not the the workforce, and they like, man, it's Monday, I got to go back to work again. Man, it's Monday. Man, it's Monday. And everybody's echoing, man, it's Monday. And you got all these different people in different genres and different industries complaining and holding their head and looking stressed out that it's Monday. So that is something that researchers are studying more and have become more aware of. And it's really seen in schools, and we're trying to address those issues, because that is leading us to a mental space where it's dark, and we need to get ourselves out of that dark headspace. Now, I really was hoping that when researchers really got involved into that study, it will, really help boost the concept into manifestation, that we need a 4-day work week. We don't need a Monday work day. We need Monday fun day. Okay. We need to mandate that as a law, as a rule, as a global thing, because some parts of the world overseas, they take naps throughout the day. They have far more holidays than Americans do. They're doing things to offset the possibility for mental decline. And Americans really need to look at a lot of those things that they're doing. I've been writing about it, doing a couple of scholarly writings about that for quite some time now. I don't know when it's going to catch on, but I remember when I was at a student attending UIC downtown Chicago, a lot of times the student is screaming into the void as a part of an assignment, but sometimes those assignments, whereas they are profound from particular students, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere until somebody can covet it as their own, and make their own thesis and their own study, and then it gets up from there. But it's a slow change, so it was more difficult to see that change. We'll get into that kind of thing later on, but I said that because I'm driving to a point um, about the Monday syndrome, because the same thing can be said about returning to school schedules. Now everybody is really acknowledging how people are having those exhibits of, anxiety, stress, and depression, because they're seeing that, a lot of people, as soon as you say it's time to return back to school or go to school shopping, and because July is the perfect time to do your back to school shopping and start collecting all the things that you need for school throughout the school semester, at the very least. Half of the school semester, and then the next half of the school semester you could go shopping again. But a lot of times, people don't want to even hear about, oh, it's time to go back to school shopping, because it's created that Monday syndrome, where it's like, now you got that school syndrome, that back to school syndrome. I'm like, no, I don't want to think about it. That depresses me. That triggered me. Now you done said some fighting words. People are all in a tiffy about, being in a situation where they're like, man, I don't want to go back to school. Leave me alone. Yes, especially the children. They have been affected by death and suicide. I have to agree with you, sis. Gotta agree when you're right. And it's a lot that's going on. Whereas a lot of times adults used to tell kids, well, you don't know what stress is. You don't know what anxiety is. You don't know what it's like to be depressed. You don't have no problems in your life. But they did not go to school in their children's era. They only attended school in their era. And then even if they do go to school, they're in a different capacity. They're there in a different setting, in a different mindset, in a different perspective than the child that is mandatory to be there and deal with the kids, deal with their peers. Your peers are now grown. You don't have, and then some of the adults can't even deal with these kids, and they're like, well, now I have going back to school syndrome, because I don't want to be here, because these children, they're taking over, and their waywardness is becoming the norm. And it's the schools represent, they have a business model that is more exhibiting the private prisons than it is a school system. So that's something else we'll get into later. I wasn't trying to go that deep just this fast, but traditional schools don't normally encourage students to record in classrooms, because it's a safe place for growing, learning, and making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. And it's one of the freedoms that a lot of college students really enjoy and take advantage of. They're recording everything so that they can review it for later. What you say, Jackie? Yes, we need to be more understanding. Yeah, we do need to be more understanding. And a part of that understanding is allowing kids rooms to make mistakes, but still, recording it, because a lot of times everybody has their own perspective. And that perspective, that viewpoint of what happened, what transacted, what transpired in their actions, and what happened, like, in the wrong, how better, would have been different. We don't see it in the moment, but that recording can be for the purpose of learning and growing and making corrections to those very things that we're saying we are seeing in school, but we cannot resolve in school. So that's one of the things that I've seen about some of the school systems. A lot of them are private or charter schools, more elite schools, but it's effective. But you really can't tell if it's really effective if those schools didn't already exhibit, profound acts of waywardness and disorder. So you could really just, if it improved by like 90%, it has to be a significant number of increase in positivity in order for it to be assumed to be helpful or beneficial. And that's difficult to do when the model is not that of the one that was contrived with public schools and schools that have more children or people in poverty, if those studies aren't being conducted in those institutions as opposed to the ones that's more elite and they're more invested in the school doing well and their students doing well. You have to be in a place where the problem is in order to see the significance of such thing. Yes, God allows mistakes for growth. Yes, he does. And if we're not using those mistakes for the purpose of growing, we're really using it to hurt somebody and model what we want them to go to, which is private prisons or from the schoolhouse to the jailhouse. And that kind of mentality has put a lot of people in a fatal mental disposition where they'd rather cause more hell and scorched earth as they take themselves out. So we want to turn those things around. I'm sure a lot of people can think of, examples of positive and negative experiences and results that they wish they had a camera in the school where you can say, hey, did somebody see this? Did you see this? I remember when I was in elementary school, it was predominantly white, and there was only a few African Americans, and this one, it had a lot of people who were adults, but they were short. They were short white women. And there was this one African American boy who was in the elementary school, and he was taller than everybody and bigger than everybody, to include the principal. So he was like, whatever he did, the teachers and the school would seem to be afraid to address him. So I recall we were in line, because back then that's what it was. You line up for everything. You line up to go to the bathroom. You line up to get in the classroom. You line up to get out of the classroom. But we were lined up outside the classroom, and this kid goes around flipping all the girls' boob, and it's like, who's looking? It's like he flips a boob or chin checks you. And what's a chin check? Is when you get across, you get punched across your chin with a nice little cross, and you're going to take one or the other. So it was like nobody was there to stop that kid. That kid grew up to be a degenerate to society and later institutionalized in prison because it started in school and no one stopped him. And everybody that was there that was supposed to be the authority figures were way shorter than him. He wasn't listening to anybody. That's a prime example of why cameras are something that's more of a desirable thing to have in such an institution than someplace where kids are more well behaved and the staff and the teachers are all taller than the students or bigger than the students, or they know how to present themselves as the authority figures in those students' lives. A lot of times you don't have people who can exhibit that kind of authoritative role in students' lives. So it's a lot of waywardness that's being perpetuated even between the kids. Between the teachers. There's times when teachers single out the kid they don't like so the teachers or the other students can make the child's life miserable. So there's, countless reasons people have mentally depressive symptoms when they're thinking about school, or whenever someone says anything about school, it triggers a panic in a lot of people. And researchers are starting to look at that more and try to address that, especially now as a lot of teachers, amid the Great Resign, as the social I saw on the news, they say, are we done with the Great Resign? But we're not done with it because we have not addressed the problems. And a lot of the problems derived from traditional school, brick and mortar schools. I'm not going to say traditional schools, because it's not traditional. It's just brick and mortar. And it's a lot of waywardness that was perpetuated in that brick and mortar because it it closed off what we consider morals, and faith, and things that encouraged and motivated, incentivized people, and we moved those natural things and replaced it with artificial things that didn't hold water. So you can't incentivize people when all they have to do is spontaneously consider that incentive invalid and do whatever the heck they want to do. So researchers have learned that already. But anyway, at times it triggers anxiety that leads to the thought of returning to school schedules. It at times triggers anxiety and leads to lashing out in unpredictable ways in unthinkable times and places. And it no longer is exclusive to any academic level or targeted group. I know a lot of people have been watching the news and you know what I'm talking about. It starts in elementary. For example, look at Sandy Hook, that young man who just snapped one day. However, there was a stockpile of weapons that was supposed to target a particular group of people in a warlike behavior. And if that stockpile of weapons wasn't available, that young man, when he snapped, he probably would have been far more limited than to be able to cause as much damage as he did when he went back to elementary school, his kindergarten. And, you know, these are different people, different children, but in his mind, he didn't see that. So he that stockpile of weapons ended up backfiring on the person who had the stockpile, and it was worse because he went back and exacted revenge on people who weren't even there anymore. But mentally, that's all he could see. That's what he literally saw there. Now, I'm not making up for it and I don't excuse it. It was a terrible thing. And if it did not move the nation to do something about it, which it really hasn't because it has escalated since Sandy Hook, we need to review these things and go back and learn from those mistakes and move forward by fixing it. Now, we saw Columbine High where all those high school students moving through the levels of grades. We started with kindergarten. Now we're going to high school. I'm not skipping any grades intentionally, but it's such a long list. I don't want to go down all the list. Just the most commonly known. But the Columbine High School, it wasn't the first high school example. It was the least expected location for implementing the already well established preventative measures for protection in schools and the communities around the school. But those things were not implemented because, well, you know, the area it was in, and it wasn't in a poverty area. It wasn't kids who were in poverty. It wasn't kids who were at risk, but you don't know who's at risk. So you need to stop assuming and see the trend and get ahead of it instead of trying to twist the narrative. But anyway, since then, there is a school in Colorado more towards the mountains where all the patrons in there carry a gun. And it's like, I'm not saying that that's the answer. I'm not saying that that's an effective preventative measure. I'm just saying, you know, that was their conclusion because when you don't address it as a whole, everybody comes to their own conclusions and they do what they need to do so they can feel safe. But then there was the PhD student who was a theater mass murderer. He strategically planned this mass murder, um, uh, and it was like, who would think that a PhD would do something like that? But there's a lot of pressure on a PhD student, so it doesn't stop at kindergarten and elementary. It doesn't stop at high school. It continues throughout. And what about the guy who strategically planned a mass murder of, you know, someplace where he didn't even attend school. He went there and he killed all them young people in their school housing who had nothing to do with whatever he was mad about. Now, these two PhDs went into different directions, and it was not the target that they had in mind was not school. It was somewhere totally different. So it's not to say that we have to try to protect the school just because it's the school, or protect the school at the school level or the community. It's about the communities that support the school. And everybody supports the school because everybody who's anybody, if you're born and breathing, you're going to school in some capacity. And even if you don't, you still got to pay taxes, because even if you homeschool, you still got to pay taxes. And a part of those taxes go to traditional school buildings and brick and mortar schooling. So everybody should have a say in how to fix that, because a lot of these problems derive in school by the school. These are, unpredictable escalations of unresolved mental issues that happen in school, and it's something that's continually being perpetuated in school. But the backlash occurred in an escalated manner because we are aware of the problems, but we aren't seeing the consequences fully. So we're not as invested in the resolution as we should be. The system is broken and we know it. But like a PhD told me as I was in my journey to earn my own PhD, well, I was hazed when I sojourned to earn my PhD, so it's a natural part of the selection process. I asked him, I was like, well, if it was wrong when it happened to you, why would you perpetuate that? Now that you have the power and the authority and the experience of having lived through that and survived it, why would you perpetuate that? Why would you kick crap down the hill now because you're on the top of the hill and able to kick the crap down the hill? It just doesn't make much sense in a situation, in an era, I should say, where, we're looking at the escalation of things. It's not sour grapes. It's a generation that understands, wrongdoing and feels compelled to trump the old levels of wrongdoing with a far greater impact than ever before. Some people feel like, you know, when you look back and you review what happened in those situations, a lot of times the testimonials were, fatalistic, because they felt like there's no other way. I can't do anything else. There was no other way. There was no other options. There was nothing I can do. What'd you say, Jackie? Yes, educational system is not helping our kids. That's why I used to volunteer. And even the volunteers are starting to, jump out of it, because they're like, look, it's not worth my life. Look, it's not worth whatever it is I see it doing to the kids, because I don't have the voice or the authority to make the changes. Even QTAM, whistleblowers, they're it's like it's still not enough. I can't do enough in order to make a difference, make a positive difference that would alter these dark mental spaces that these young people are, or students, or people, period, have felt they don't have another choice but to do something that scorches earth and gets everybody. And then they take themselves out because they feel like, when the weight their act them, it's, oh no, what have I done? You weren't in a good space mentally. You weren't necessarily there. I don't know if you've ever had a moment in your life where you acted out outside of your character, and before you realized it, you were outside of your character, and you realized it, and suddenly you back to character. You like, wait a minute, that is so unlike me. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. You may not even apologize. You might run away and, regroup and have to revisit that at another time. But there are times more like that than there used to be, because there's a lot of stress and pressure, and the world isn't willing to alleviate that stress the way people really need for them to. Some people overseas, yeah, they take naps during business days. The company takes a nap. But in America, we're not doing that. We're not taking naps. We're not taking toys such as automatic weapons. We're not putting restrictions, and we're not enforcing sanctions. We're not doing, we're not invested as we should be into getting us to a place where we can be as an effective economy and have the strong currency that we once had, because we're not focused as we should be, because we don't understand that mental health is physical wealth. We're not understanding the relation, the correlation. We're not understanding the connection. We're not understanding that these are the future workforce for the economy to thrive. And where are they? They're in Sandy Hook in kindergarten. They're in Columbine in high school. They're in different places getting their PhDs. They're in school, period. And the school has, for several decades, even generations, I have to say since inception, targeted a group. And that target has never, ever, ever been the only person affected. And that's one of the things that I've spoken and touched on in different episodes. So definitely go back and look at those episodes. But a good example of generations is, looking at the historical records of how pharaohs used to be when they built pyramids. And one pharaoh was like, oh, I'm going to outdo that last pharaoh. I'm going to be the better pharaoh. I'm going to build bigger temples and bigger pyramids and bigger sculptures. And I'm going to kill more slaves than anybody else. Yes, slaves existed long before African Americans were born and created from all those other cultures in what we call America after it was established and renamed as America. It was long, long before renaming the place we call North America. It was the pharaohs, and the mentality of trumping the last wrong. It's an old concept. It's not new. It's nothing new under the sun. It's just you may not be as aware of it as you should be. And because those mentalities exist, so do the corrections, because we didn't stay there. People didn't stay there. They may have dwelt there far longer than what they should, but they didn't reside there because we're somewhere different now. So now that we can know the consequences and possible scenarios of every variation and type of anything you can think of and anything that's happened already, because we're the generation of AI. You can just, put that information in the AI and ask the AI, predict the outcome. We just know everything because algorithms can generate the results in a matter of seconds of any and everything we can think of or imagine, because it's already happened. Even if you're not aware that it's happened overseas somewhere. Um, Throughout my years of studying, I studied national and global as well as local. It wasn't very much information to study locally. And, I wanted to study global studies because I need to see the bigger picture. I'm just a bigger picture type of person, so that I can understand the intricacies, because I can't understand the intricacies when I feel like something is being hidden from me. Like I don't know what's going on. I know that something's missing. So I can't understand the words that's coming out of your mouth if I see that there's pieces to this puzzle missing. So I'm the big picture type of person. I got to see it all. Now, you might wonder, how can you predict what's coming? How can you know what's coming? A lot of people say there's seasons for these things. A lot of people say, well, there's a time for everything. And it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So let me put it this way. Because there's nothing new under the sun, and there's cycles of these very things that we're enduring and going through and creating. And it's because, you know, we don't have different things. We have different ways of accomplishing the same things, because we're human. It is never going to be a time where we're not going to be human. Even if we evolve and be something else, a lot of people say we're going to evolve and be aliens. Even if we were to evolve, at our roots, we're still human. And those humanistic um, things about us that I mentioned in the beginning of the program, science and faith, the tangible and intangible, that's innate in us, and it's not going anywhere. It's our foundation. Even though the computer is going to do exactly what I do to predict events, meaning draw from everything, every bit of knowledge that you have, all the history, all the generations of all the things that transpired. Now, how did I do it? Encyclopedias, studies, libraries. It didn't take any time to do it, especially because by the time I was in school, I had the use of computers, and I wanted to see and push the limits and see what it could do. That's how I did it. I don't know how anybody else did it, but that's how I did it. I wanted to push the limits, because when I was little and I would read the Bible or be in church, I would have these questions, and people would always feel like I'm pushing the limits. Like, why are you pushing it? It's not that I was pushing it. I wanted to understand, and I was asking questions, because if you tell a little kid like me that the God said you can't ask him for things that he can't do, and you can't even imagine to ask him or to think of something he can't do or accomplish, then I think, okay, let me think, can I do that? So it's not that I'm trying to be challenging, it's that I'm trying to test and see if what you said is true, so I can believe what you said, so I have something to ground me, something that a foundation, a solid foundation to build and grow from. But I can't do that if I can't test it to see that, yes, this ground is solid. Yes, this is factual. Yes, this is evidence that this is factual. So it is not just rooted in the intangible faith that you believe that this is possible, but the factual evidence that, yes, this is possible. And a lot of times science calls that an anomaly, and they name it different things, phenomenon and different things like that. So I've been studying these things for a very long time. This has been my life of studying phenomenon, faith, and things like that. But it's like, it's helped to be able to predict how these things are going. And we're not teaching that sort of thing in school. These kids are playing with these computers and they don't really know what they're doing. They just toying around with it just like I did and learning. And that's what we should all be doing, playing around with that computer and see what it does. And that's how that's how the AI, I should say, can predict these events. It's not taking it, it's not just contriving these things out of nothing. It's going to draw from a global database comprised of historical events and data from various sources that were real or imaginary, because it draws from entertainment, it draws from fiction and sci-fi. It's drawing conclusions based upon what's going on in the time and space, among other factors, in order to derive exactly the prediction that it has. Now, it may be off, it may be off by a little bit, but it may not be. It's better than us trying to have a narrow-minded perspective and trying to predict something that's, going to happen and being completely off center, because we've narrowed our understanding and we've limited our ability to know anything, because our studies were focused on local, or our studies were focused on national. But when you have your studies focused on global studies, you see the world. And by seeing the world, it makes you more mature mentally and able to do like these computers. Like, everybody's so impressed that this AI can do. The AI was programmed by a person who had maybe local, national, and global input to put in there. So it wasn't just one component, but many factors. And that's what we need. We need many factors. And where do we get it? We get it from school. Now, the elders in diverse communities, our elders of the world, they don't need a computer or a global database. They've lived long enough to be the database. Young people rarely tap into their bank of knowledge generally because they don't know what to ask, because they don't know what they don't know. Elders may rarely share knowledge because with younger people, because generally they don't feel valued, or they don't believe they'll be well received, because odds are the young people won't heed elders' wisdom before it's too late anyway. So they don't want to waste their breath or their time. How do I know this? Because a great deal of my time was spent with elders, because that was, where I learned to make the connections when I was in my journey for studying various things. I had to ask someone. And normally you go to the library, you ask a librarian, the librarian telling you about the Dewey Decimal System, and now you got to sit through that BS, right? But you can't be disrespectful and say, I don't want to know about that, all that Dewey Decimal and all these numbers and what to do. Just tell me. And then they tell you about the alphabetical order of things, and trying to find this information. Well, all of that is helpful. And you really got to stop trying, it's a snooze fest. And you got to stop trying to like doze off in the middle of them trying to explain it. It's helpful information and it's necessary information. So finding some common ground on it, what I did, I would, joke around. So it would make it interesting for them to understand that I'm listening. I heard what you said and I made a little joke and it made you laugh, which made that connection and broke that ice so that we can continue to have a positive rapport. And it wasn't just, superficial. It was something that they could feel and I could feel. So in that feeling, we can commune and grow together. So a lot of times they would, give me information about how they felt. And I saw that throughout my travels and throughout my educational journey to get more knowledge and learn things and, help different people. So that's how I know about, how elders felt about, that sort of thing. But anyway, these are just contributing factors that cause young people and elders to cringe at the thought of information exchange. So I thought I'll put that in there, but I have to definitely give a shout out to the elders because, if it wasn't for them and people being afraid that they were losing all that wisdom and that knowledge, there would have been no need to develop a database called a computer that could store all of that information. Sit an elderly person down and just type down everything they say. Whatever they said, just type it into the computer. And that's what we all have to understand. Just because we think and we want to feel like the information that we put in the World Wide Web is not going to go any further than, that one computer, that one location where you're putting some information. It's like creating land in an entire world. And this land, you can keep expanding it, but it never goes away. Even if you blow it up, it'll still be there. It'll just be in parts and pieces. And it's still dirt and clay that at some point in time can find its way back to its body and reattach itself to its body, or reattach itself to a place where you might not have thought to look, but it's still there. So you can't scrub the database, even though we always lose our elders, but we don't have to lose their wisdom, because now we have computers and databases that store all of that wisdom there. Now the only thing we'll be missing is the actual person and all the love and their physical presence. But anyway, it's that same cringe from Monday and going back to that same, even before that elder who had to exchange information with their youth or their younger people, their young blood. But We can see that same cringe when people say things about school, and that same cringe can be seen in schools because it escalated to become a socially destructive establishment, which faster that fosters a broken system and the brokenness in people who the world's economy relies upon to keep a productive economy going. It's not a question of how do we get productive, how do we perpetuate productivity in society amid unproductive patriots. It's not a question of who to blame and why or how to enforce punishment. We've arrived at the point where absolute resolution is time to manifest. There's nowhere to hide because there's no safe place to rest and contrive waywardness that won't eventually come back to you. Students, if you're not if you're not doing this, you should be. So take notes. In my last few minutes, I'm going to have to go ahead and run through this. So take notes. I don't have time to go too deep. So please understand notes are an abridged version of the whole, meaning the short of the long. Keep a recording device on your person at all times on school grounds. You don't need to share all of your recordings. Don't use the recordings to blackmail people, and exercise wisdom to know what to keep or what to dump. Store online and offline all those recordings because crap happens, especially when you capture something helpful. Keep copies of all of your work and syllabus online and offline. It validates the time and the concepts and ownership of those assignments that you're writing, all the intellectual property that belongs to you, and it keeps track of it, especially if you're keeping your own record, which I highly recommend. Don't delete or discard school correspondences, whether you initiated it or your instructors or administration uh, or academic responses and communication, are the ones who initiated the correspondence, the communications that was in your recording or your and recording. You can record using a dictaphone, using a small pocket camera that stays in your pocket, so it's not necessarily projecting picture, but it's definitely recording sound. Um, and to the point where you can get to be able to show the picture, because school is a safe environment where it's a protected community where the students should not be recorded or broadcast unless they give permission and they know what you're doing with the material and what's going to happen with the material in the future. So that is something that you really have to be cognitive of in recording. But don't delete or discard the correspondences because you never know when that's going to be helpful to help develop innovative changes that we're all looking forward to. Academic correspondences and communication is not one person. It's not one person's word against uh, uh, someone else or a perception, especially when you're in an online classroom and all the interactions are recorded. So I love how brick and mortar schools have cameras recording their rooms, even though it's not for the general public to view, because when something's happening, it is not two sides of the same story and then there's the truth. It's what you saw in the picture. What did you see in the video? What did you see when you play the recording back? Is believe what you see and hear, because it's all accessible for playback, which really helps to permanently resolve a lot of the unresolved issues that transpire in these classrooms. And it's either the student's word against the teacher or the teacher's word against the student, and all these secret recordings that's coming out. And everybody's like, well, you know, um, That teacher was wrong because this, that kid was wrong because of that. Hey, show us the video. Let us see the video and let's take it from there. But it's not just to put the blame on someone, it's to learn and move forward. Business industries are using computers to track people and their abilities to identify their human capital or what they can benefit or how they can benefit the organization. What am I saying? There's a different recording that's transpiring even in business because we don't see it in just your resume. We don't see it in just the word of mouth that could be degrading to your reputation because somebody withheld knowledge from you that made you look incompetent in your last workplace. And that was why you got laid off or you felt compelled to leave that job. But jobs, new jobs, jobs that you're trying to go to, they don't know that. But there's a database that the computer is generating so that when your name comes up, it's showing a long history of excellence. It's showing a record of you, and you have a copy of that because you have the ability to record yourself. You have the ability to track your own progress, track what it is you're doing. And now in schools, students have that ability to do that. Now, before it used to be just, college students in school who would be in the lecture hall and they got the dictaphones, they got the tape recorders, they got the laptops recording, they have their cell phones recording, they have all kinds of different recording devices, and they might snooze, in class because it was a long night at that frat party or whatever else is keeping them from staying awake in that class. It may be somebody who speaks in a monotone voice and it just automatically hypnotizes people and they go to sleep, even if they had a good night's sleep before. It's just, different reasons why recording was always preferred and always the go to method in learning. And that's coming from a scholar. I don't like to pat myself on the back, but if you really want to know, that is what has helped in so many situations. I couldn't even begin to tell you. So these things that I'm telling you are tried and true methods. I hope you can benefit from it like I did. The same could be said about these recording things. The same technology is being relied upon to identify students as future employees. So you need your own copy of such data too. Don't rely on somebody to tell your story. You don't have to worry about, who telling your story when you could tell your own story. That's one thing I've seen about TikTok and social media. People are out here telling their own story. And that's something that everybody should be able to do. Whereas before, people lost their voice. They couldn't speak for themselves. They used to have to hire lawyers or afford to hire lawyers to speak for them and represent them and advocate for them because self-advocacy just became a scream in the void. And a lot of people felt like, well, I don't have another choice. I don't have any other help. This is my only option. Scorch earth and get out of here. But there's another way. Your socials help. um, Whatever social media, even if you don't have a social media, you can just go and generate one and put that out there so that you have a way that you have structured what people see about you. And people who do have socials, you got to realize that social is saying something about you. And if every 5 minutes you posting and in each one of those 5 minutes you're a different person, that's saying a lot about you. So be careful what you're doing. Don't listen to people tell you different. Be careful what you're doing because you don't want to misrepresent yourself and think that someone's going to excuse it because everybody's not doing that. I'm just saying, if it came down between the decision between two people and both of you are well qualified for a position or to get into a school, they're going to look at that information and you would have canceled yourself out. So be careful. Okay. So anyway, your socials can help you to document or exhibit your strengths. It's more your control than it's ever been before due to your ability to prevent the narrative from being twisted. Now, don't go and, follow group think and twist the narrative on your own, saying, well, everybody's doing this, everybody's out here twerking, everybody's out here saying that, they're a headhunter, everybody out here saying this, doing that, and showing they got guns, and showing they smoking weed, and showing all of these things that they're doing, and showing that they experiment with their life. But you have to believe not everybody's doing that. You have to understand, even if you're looking at, TikToks from all over the world, how many, if it was everybody, if you understood how many people there were in the world, how many people really are doing it. So don't say everybody. And you could be that somebody that makes that difference. So when the decision comes between you and somebody who didn't do that, it'll be an easier decision that's made. And all of these things are going to help you to establish a brighter mental position, especially when it comes time for you to actually go back to school. So hopefully you got something from this episode. And if you got something from it, send it to another student, because some of this information, where it seems like, people would know these things already, they don't. Some people say, well, I have to have my cell phone in order to record. There's a thing called a dictaphone. There's other devices that record for hours on end, doesn't get hot, and will not shut off, doesn't need to be plugged in, or you can use batteries or USB and charge it, and it can last for hours throughout your child's school day. Record. And it doesn't have to be in their pocket. It can be in their backpack. And that's not going to make anything go off if the school has metal detectors and things like that. That is not illegal for the students to have aids that can help them to learn. And that is an aid that can help students to learn and grow. And then there's no such thing as, locking the parent out of the institution for the school's safety and the children's safety, because now you can know more about what's going on and how your kids feel. So you're not dismissing them and then shoving them off to school again the next day. You're understanding that, yes, they do have these stressors. Yes, these problems are insurmountable to them, and it's unthinkable how they can overcome them when all they have is themselves and their short, limited experience of dealing with these things. So you can be more helpful to your children or to the student when you listen to the recording or review the recordings, so that you can help them. If you're going to send them back to school, have a way to help them to deal with what's going on. And I strongly advise any patrons in the school to do so as well, because it's a lot of people that's leaving the schools, that's helping the schools as adults and volunteers for this very reason. So I would strongly suggest that more people initiate a method of recording, so that you will have something, so you don't get the concept twisted, and you can get the help that you need. That's my show for today. Remember, mental health is physical wealth.